Welcome to our inaugural edition of First Fridays. This is our exciting new monthly series where we've got CX giants and VIPs to join us to share their experience, their passion, their leadership from some very unique environments. And so some of you might be eating lunch during this. That's cool. If you've got something really good, hold it up in front of your camera. We plan to be a low calorie consumption, but a high in CX nutrients experience for you. At least that's the plan. Today's focus is all about amplifying the voice of your customer and how to broadcast that feedback back into your organization, both in the near term and then from a cultural sustainability, perspective after that. You already see some CX giants on your screen there. There's Doug Fowler, President and COO of the Daniel Group. There's Lynn Daniel. There's a reason Daniel and Daniel Group go together, the founding father. We got some of the other Daniel Group family with us. Thank you guys. But most importantly, we've got this amazing leader, special guest, Kaylee Edgerly, who's president and CEO at Sunny Merriman. If you don't know who that is, that's a top performing, very customer centric bus and container dealership, and they do a lot. And Kaylee, thank you for taking the time so we can learn from you. There's a lot of CX passion out there. I can see already people battling this thing every day. So with that, Kaylee and his team are doing this thing right.
I couldn't agree more. We are bummed that the snow had different ideas on our conference this week. Kaylee was to be our day one keynote speaker. So, Kaylee, this is a somewhat poor excuse for what we were going to put you in front of everyone in person. But we had already planned to have Kaylee here at First Fridays. He brings a unique perspective, in my opinion, for a couple of reasons. Number one, he has been CEO of Thomas Built Buses, which is a major school bus manufacturer, a unit of Daimler Trucks North America. So he has sat in that OEM manufacturer seat. And then he's transitioned to president CEO currently of Sunny Merriman, as Brian mentioned. And so he sits in the dealer seat. And it's a treat for us because we serve OEMs, we also serve dealers. Our roots are in dealers. And you see and hear the stories of like, well, they just don't get it. And you hear it from the manufacturers and the dealers. And Kaylee has sat in both seats. So Kaylee, one of the things that we're interested in hearing about is, what does it look like from both sides of that coin? And then the second one, and I'm just going to tell a little story on you, Kaylee. I got the surprise of my life when Kaylee pops up in an email several years ago. And usually when you see a CEO commenting on an aspect of your service, you're thinking metrics, pricing, contract renewal, whatever it may be. And Kaylee says, hey, in like second minute of this survey, your surveyor said XYZ on the audio. And I just wondered if you guys could, I can't remember if it was pronunciation, but I had to do a double take. I've never had a president CEO say, hey, in minute 2 of the audio, literally listening to the customer's voice. So it's funny, in the age of AI, and Daniel Group's got, in a future session, you may see some of our new, what we're pushing on with AI, and we're excited about that, but it's fed by personal conversations or digital touches with customers. And so, Kaylee, I think it's somewhat unique that you sat on the dealer and manufacturer side and you personally listen to the survey. So we're going to get into that, but would love for you to introduce yourself to the group and just a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Doug. First of all, thank you for having me on. I'm looking forward to kind of a casual approach. I look forward to maybe when you guys actually get your show on the road again and be able to meet people in person, because I think part of the message is we have to show up for each other. And, this is showing up, but showing up in person like you had in Charlotte was going to be even better. But I didn't know you were going to talk about that pronunciation thing. And that brings up a story that helps bridge my time from Thomas Built Buses. And really, I spent 27 years at Daimler Trucks North America in different leadership positions. And in doing so, I'm talking with a bunch of CX people here, and I feel like, to reframe it to the Super Bowl, like, you guys are the quarterbacks, and I've never thrown a ball. I'm not a quarterbacks coach. I do something else. So my knowledge is just my experience. But if we go back to that pronunciation story, When I was at Thomas in 2016, the top guy at Daimler Trucks worldwide, his name's Wolfgang Bernhard, number 2 guy in all Mercedes-Benz Daimler Truck at the time. And I got to spend a day with him. And, corporate is corporate. And, you spend the day with the number 2 guy of a 280,000 person company, and you pay attention, and he walked away that day saying, I don't care what any of my minions in finance tell you. I want you to take as much money as you possibly can and build an electric school bus. And so we did, and the electric school bus is now on the road. We've got 350 operating here in the state of Virginia, where I'm now at. But back in 2016, we get this electric school bus rolling, and we had a contest with our 2,000 people at Thomas Built Buses to say, what should we call this thing? And we got the craziest ideas. Of course, we're transporting kids, so the hourly guy on the shop floor that says Thunderbolt, I don't think so. That's nothing that we want to name something we're transporting kids with. But our purchasing director at the time said, we want to call the prototype Julie. Sounds like perhaps a child's name that might ride the bus, but also it's the symbol of, or the electrical unit of power, a joule in electrification. So we spell it Jouley. And that was our prototype, and it went for a while, and then we introduced it at trade shows, and everyone loved Julie. And then Daimler came out with their Cascadia electric version, but it was an E-Cascadia. And they came out with their M2, but it had to be an EM2. And so all the guys in Germany said, you can't call this thing Julie, it's going to be your EC2, because that's the name of our school bus. And we went to the market, and the market said, no, I don't identify with that whatsoever. What happened with Julie? And we gave up the trademark, and I had to go to my marketing guy and get the trademark back. No one took it, believe it or not. And then I fast forward, now I'm at Sunny Merriman after I transitioned out of Daimler. I'm listening to the survey, Doug, and I think it was one of your interviews kept on asking one of our customers, what about Jolie? How does Jolie go? And it's spelled Jouley. And I just couldn't have that. Right? It has such a story and a reputation and a depth that we had to get it corrected. But I enjoy listening to those surveys because they connect me not only to your interviewers that I think do a tremendous job, but the emotions within the customer's head at that moment that we can respond to from a customer standpoint. Your first question about what is it like on both sides of the fence, I think everyone probably knows this. When you work at the OEM, you think all the dealers are stupid, and when you work at the dealer, you think all the OEMs can't get a damn thing done. That's just the way it is. It was that way for 27 years, and some of my staff here, they forget I worked there for 27 years. I'm there, I can't believe those Thomas folks can't get this done. Well, to make a design change, you just don't flip a switch. There's drawings and testing and validations and compliance, and then you have to update your service records and your parts records, and it's a process. So there's that little bit lack of respect from the dealership back to the OEM. And then when I was on the OEM side, same thing. We think the dealers are out there, so they're printing money, taking the product that we manufacture and design and test and hand it to customers, and they're sitting on a lake somewhere just absorbing the checks. So there's definitely that sense of lack of respect, I think, on both sides sometimes. And seeing it from both sides, it's a tremendous feat to bring a piece of machinery of any sort together, from raw materials to putting it in customers' hands. And a great deal of people do great jobs all along that supply chain.
I feel like there are echoes of the customer feedback process in what you just mentioned with the dealer and manufacturer and the respect. Sunny Merriman team had the benefit of someone who worked at the OEM for 27 years. And so there may be at first a bit of cognitive dissonance, but they may start to appreciate the OEM and be able to work more effectively in that environment, because they can hear from you, hey guys, we're not showing up trying to screw up, we're really trying here, and here's what we're dealing with on our side of the equation. I think our hope is when we go out and get feedback from customers, we can feel a similar tension sometimes of the customers being like, the dealers don't care, or like manufacturer does this or that with their product. But who am I to say they don't, I don't matter to them. And on the other side, some of our clients are like, gosh, it's so demanding and they're just out to get me. And so if you can humanize the two sides, like you being head of Sunny Merriman and then the team getting to know you as a human being and like, hey, Kaylee's not a bad guy. Actually, maybe I need to rethink this. Our hope is some of the customer feedback and you listening to the actual voice of the customer is a powerful ingredient in humanizing the customer and driving some change and helping your team say, you know what, they're not entirely unreasonable here. If the customer's got a suggestion for improvement, is that one of the ingredients of why you're at the head of an organization and you've done it twice now and you're personally listening to the audio of phone calls?
Yeah, I think I have to give a lot of credit to the guy that used to sit in this seat before. And that was Floyd Merriman, second generation of the Merriman family. I'm the third not to be a family member, but if I think back to sitting in a conference room, boardroom in Thomas with my quality group, engineers would be gathered around and we'd have our quarterly quality objective meeting so we could meet our ISO standard practice and keep our ISO certification. We go over our Daniel Group surveys, and there would always be a few comments up there and actually quotes, and some of them cut, right? And you feel like the customer displeasure with what we were doing to produce a particular design feature or how we followed up and some on our dealers. And I always use those as motivation. I'd dig more in. I'd ask my quality manager, let's follow up. Let's talk to this specific customer. That was the right scale for my job at the time. And then when I made the transition here, and now on the other side, I see there's surveys come in, and Floyd's semi-retired at the time. This is after COVID, so he hadn't been in the office for a long time. And he's like, yeah, you're responding to all those Daniel surveys, aren't you? I'm like, what you talking about? I'm supposed to get the report, right? I'm going to get the report, and then I'm going to pick and choose which one. He's like, oh, no. I listened to every one of those things, and here's the email I wrote back, which was a chain email, right? They wrote back, said, thank you for listening. It's a pleasure for your time. I heard what you say. We look forward to getting out. But Floyd would listen to every single one of those. I didn't, coming from the corporate environment. I worked on my scale. So I just picked up what he was doing. And perhaps I took it to another level. I wouldn't write a chain email back. I always want to connect with someone about something they said. I think that's part of customer service I've learned at my team, and I have learned at various locations. It's not necessarily fixing every issue they bring up. It's listening and showing that you can respond. I remember one of the first trips I took to a school district. I think it was in West Virginia, actually, when I was still at Thomas. These guys knew I was coming. They knew my title, and they're like, "We're gonna get this guy." And this one time, a guy with this title is gonna come visit me, and I took notes. And I just should have grabbed their piece of paper because they had it. But I'm writing down on my notepad 37 different issues, and the same 37 list that they had. I should have just taken at the end of the discussion. We're going to go to lunch or something, and I said, guys, I really need to set these expectations. Like, I got 37 things on my piece of paper here. You know, we're not capable of fixing all 37, but these 2 or 3 are the ones I'm going to take back and we're going to address. And that just goes such a long way with the customer that they're listened to. So, and then we did fix those 2 issues, and the other 35 are still probably out there today.
There's a lot of people on the call that have by now have a fairly mature, here at the Daniel Group, our mantra is we measure, manage, and improve. And, of the folks out there in dealer land that are on the call today and many others that we serve, they've gotten pretty good at the measure piece. They're doing a great job at the manage piece. There's a lot of us now trying to chip away at the iceberg of improve. And obviously very significant in that equation is bringing your employees along for the ride, right? Bringing the team. And I think you have like 180 employees, but only 40 of them are customer facing. So I guess the question would be, how do you bring the other 140 along? How do you create the culture that's getting you where you are? Yeah,
well, there's 2 responses there I can think of, Brian. One One is my first week here. I bring this the measure portion, 27 years at Daimler. That's nailed into me. I measure everything, right? That's what we do. It's a good German way. And my first week here on the job, I went around to my employees and said, how can we tell if we're winning or not? Because I wanted to find my metrics, or I wanted to figure out what their metrics were. Just simple question. And I probably asked 15 people, employees that are touch the customers, which is really what your question is about, and those that don't. And the answers I got was, I made a customer smile today. That guy called me back for a part that hadn't done business with me before. I took care of a customer. The customer's going to return for business. Every single question I asked, no one gave me what I wanted. What I wanted is we delivered this many vehicles today. Our profitability is this. Our efficiency is that. It was all customer happy, happy, happy. And so back to Mr. Merriman's previous success, I inherited something I knew it was my job just not to screw up. So I did go through that shift here from going from OEM to dealership. Like, I can't screw this up, and I got to be more emotional, and I have to listen. I have to make sure I continue to engage, because the Merriman family did this naturally 6 years prior to me, and I don't want to be the guy to ruin this thing. And so we've been intentional at that. And the one slide that I had prepared for the conference, and Doug, I had showed this one to my marketing gal, gave it to me. She kind of drew a picture of those 40 people, right? Just little stick figures of those 40 people on a slide. And then she drew a stick figure of the 160, or the 140, right? Rest. And the way she just put it together, it looked like an American flag, right? The 40 were up in the upper right-hand corner. Then those look like the white stripes with the blue background. And she had the rest of them shaded. And so it created this image to me that she did, that I was going to present. Like, the stars represent the 50 colonies, which are served and grew off from the 13 stripes, which were colonies. In this one, it's actually the opposite, right? You got the 40 people that interact with the customers, and it's their job to feed it the other way to get people involved. So we're simply intentional to make sure that we bring these customer stories back. This morning in our production meeting, I asked 15 people in the room, some of them don't interact with customers, how did you show up for a customer? And they have to think, and they have to give an example. And the guys in service told a story about how someone brought a Ford van in that we couldn't work on, and a Ford dealership wouldn't do it, but they worked on the phone for half an hour yesterday, and they found a way to get that van into another dealer that could be serviced. We do town halls. We do survey like those 40 people. Give me a customer story. And I write them on index cards just like this, and then we go around as our other people are lined up and say, I want you to read this card. It came from someone else, but they read it. And I can stand in front of a town hall and talk all day long, and the guys in the shop and the technicians are looking down, but when their cohorts are having to read a card like that, you see the heads bobbing, and yep, I get that. And so a lot of it is just being intentional about it, storytelling, talking about it every day, serving our email with a tagline that says to please a customer, and not having that being a superficial tagline, but you feel it, and you have to push it down to your employees, and then you have to draw it out of them so they can see how they really are pleasing a customer and touching them and having an impact.
Kind of an extension beyond that's awesome. Thank you. There's a lot of insight there. Kind of an extension of that thought. Again, a lot of us, and I spent the last 6+ years at a cat dealership. Lots of times there's kind of mid-level or maybe slightly higher than mid-level CX champions, people that lay awake at night screaming when there's a bad survey, that are really passionate about driving NPS and NLS. And sometimes that can be a hard door to break through up north of you, right? Up in the executive suite. And, because to your point earlier, in the swim lanes on the giant spreadsheet, there's not a happiness, swim lane, customer happiness, right? There might be a metric. So, how would you encourage us of, you being a senior leader, the guy at the manufacturer, now at the dealer, what do you want your mid-level CX folks? It's easy when the boss sets the tone because you know how to follow the boss, right? But if you
Yep.
don't have that example, what's some good advice for us of how to break through there?
Yeah, that's if I could answer that question properly, I could probably license it and retire.
Good point.
It's a difficult one because I think all of us in our organizations are on this different level of continuum of customer culture, and it's what these CX champions are trying to do is not be the one guy or gal to be the one guy or gal, but rather spread that culture. So I don't think it's dependent on the organization. I've told the story here when Thomas wanted us to name a CX champion. My staff was mad, right? Because they said, we're all CX champions. Now you want one person to do it? So I walked in. I didn't build it. I was on high end of that continuum, and I haven't had to think about that from this perspective. But I've seen other dealers that have, and you need that passionate person to start the fire. But then you have to spread it to other people and get it burning. And getting those folks engaged. One of the things, I guess I think back in my career, mid-level management, when I was there, I was granted by higher level guys that maybe weren't the CX pounding on the chest, but would allow me a level of latitude and to do some crazy things. So there was a point when I worked in the engine business when I took some guys on a week-long trip across the country. Now, it was expensive. It probably cost $5,000 at the time to take 3 guys across the country and just visit different customers. These guys at the time worked on assembly lines, but if I was to take some of my technicians here, and I have done this across the state, and say, to heck with repairing that engine today. We need to go visit with customers. I need to reach down lower in the level of the organization, put you in front of a customer so you feel it and respect it. And when I did it back with the engine guys that worked on the assembly line, these were crusty UAW guys. And if we're going to pay for their trip, and my leadership, it wasn't their idea, but they afforded me the opportunity to do it, they had to come back and tell their other crusty UAW guys and gals about really what the customer wanted and saw. And it was just so eye-opening for them. And so I don't know how to, there's no magic tactic, but you just have to continue to try unconventional things to put people in the sense of a customer. A group of people about a month ago, I need to get my hair cut. And, it's pretty short and it's kind of thin in some places. And so I wanted, very good, Brian. You probably, this question is going to be really easy for you to answer.
Yeah.
So I was with a bunch of my guys on the shop floor, and there's a couple gals there too. And in my head, these gals look like they get their hair cut. And I know what my wife pays to get her hair cut, or dyed, shall we say.
Yeah.
And so we just sparked up a conversation, like 10 of us, 12 of us sitting around there. I said, I'm trying to wait a couple more days to get my hair cut. Usually I go between 21 and 28 days, and I can really tell when I'm at like day 23. But just for the sake of thinking of a customer and putting our minds around a customer, how much are you willing to pay per day for a haircut? We don't think of it in that terms, but how much per day? So I did the math on mine. I think mine was about $1.80, and some of the gals in the room were like $6. And then this one dude standing next to me, one of my managers, says, I can top that. Mine's $6.50 a day. I'm like, dude, you're paying that much for a haircut? I thought it was going to be the girls with the flowing locks over here. No, he says, I just love the guy, the gal that cuts my hair. I go see her every week, and I pay $60 a visit. And I'm like, well, and his name's Bobby. Bobby, why do you do that? He's just like, just the customer experience. It makes me feel good, and I love talking to her, and it's just a part of my week that I really enjoy doing. So then I grabbed that and circled back and like, let's think of our customers now. How much are they willing to pay for a school bus per day? They're pretty expensive right now, but how much are they willing to pay for service and parts and for a premium. So I think, I see those light bulbs come on when we can talk to people in our organization and find those relatable moments that we all make as consumers. With the simple thing is getting our hair cut, how much we're willing to pay a day.
Man, that's an awesome one. Side note, this is funny, but in the same ballpark. Many years ago, I told my wife, I was like, look, I have no hair. What I do have is horrendous. So how about we just get the electric shears and you cut it like every Sunday night? Because, otherwise you cut it. And seriously, until like 2 years ago, I had a spreadsheet of all the money I didn't pay a barber for like 18 years. It's absolutely insane. But yeah, mine's cheap and easy.
But think of the customer appreciation and wanting to come back you've established with your lovely wife.
Yeah, that's true. And the kids get to watch and make fun of me, of old dad. That's awesome. Just, that's actually a pretty good segue, Doug, into the kind of the business framework of how Kaylee runs this whole thing and connects it all to the business outcomes and incomes.
I have 2 notes before we jump into the business side of it. The amplifying customer voice, from a leadership perspective, when we go on leadership development and we're sort of coming up through, there's often a tendency to highlight, you mentioned the word storytelling, I think, and there's often a tendency to see it as what we need to do as leaders is to tell story and be the storytellers. And what was striking to me was there were 40 index cards going out, and boy, that's a heck of an amplifier, right? When you've got 40 voices telling the story of the customer versus one. So for me, that's a bit of a reframe from how do we amplify the customer's voice? It's not just about a single leader on their own having that passion, which is appropriate, telling the story, when you can say, hey, I'd love to hear from you all, and get the staff talking about CX and what it means to them. That just the math about it is an amplification of the customer's voice. So that was neat. That was really neat to hear.
There's a human element about that too, Doug. The human element is people are used to listening to me. When they see their coworker that they know is in a little bit of an unfriendly place because I asked them to be, they're more respectful. They listen. They follow up with questions. So that human element amplifies that a little bit more too.
I love that. The other note I took was you were talking about, Brian had asked you, how do you, let's say you don't have an evangelical leader and 60 years of culture behind you of customer centricity. How do you get the ball rolling? And you talked about unconventional methods. One of the common threads felt like direct contact with the customer, direct human contact as a spark, a way to start the fire. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. That gets to the theme of this morning was showing up. And those production meetings I was talking about that we do, we used to do just like this. I mean, for my first 4 years here, and I never did that at Thomas. Like, no, please come in my office, let's talk. And I tolerated it here. And started this year, January 1, I'm like, there's a boardroom right next to me. Let's just be there and show up for ourselves as individuals, because you can see the body language and me waving my arms and the dude over there in the corner going like this, just like you can when you show up with a customer, right? I get some of the emotions from the interviews that I listen to, and that's the reason why I listen to them. But somehow, some way, we got to make ways to show up at our customers' doorsteps or get them to show up here, because especially post-COVID, because just like my production meetings, you miss so much, and when you get it back, there's something really tangible there.
And so we're all feeling really warm, and this is lovely, and there's a lot of sunshine here, Kaylee, about customer centricity. Can you show us the money? Because at the end of the day, like, we need to, if we're in a business doing a behavior, we kind of need that to be a healthy thing for the business. So it seems obvious, but often I feel like we get lost in the metrics, or we have to wade through a thicket of process and metrics, and then try and connect that to financial or business performance. Would love your 2 cents and just, some of your mental framework or your ideas about how does CX kind of connect into business performance?
Yeah, well, one, you can tell your customers or your employees if they want to get paid. We have to make money, and to make money, you have to be nice at customers. And try to put them in that frame of mind. We are an ESOP here, which is an employee stock ownership program. So that helps a little bit, and we're always advertising that, like, we need customer care, so we have customers doing business with us. But at a very high level, what's been drilled into me, and I've had different organizations, small organizations within Daimler that I've been able to lead. Going back to Doug, you and I have discussed this, Peter Drucker's principle that any business has to serve something in society. A business cannot exist unless it's fulfilling some need in society. So, whether it's Caterpillar heavy duty equipment and a dealer that bridges that connection with customers and places the orders and parts and service, we're all probably sitting in a place today where we firmly are serving society in one way or another. So we're at a business, but to be successful and long-standing, my theory, and that I pass on to employees, is underneath that overarching principle is my business serving society are two others. One, it has to make money because I have to pay my employees' bills, and hopefully it's structured in a way that we're able to make money. And so that's one of the two tenets under serving society. The second tenet is the simple one that we're talking about. You got to please the customer. We go back to that hair cutting example. That the gal that cuts my hair is working in a place that's serving society because the humans decided they want cut hair. So there's a purpose there in serving society. She's set up and she's got her expenses, and she charges me the $36 every time I come in there, and she's making money. If she's not pleasing me or other customers, I'm not coming back because it's a competitive world out there and capitalism reigns. So that's my basic framework, is you got to make money, but if you're not pleasing that customer has many choices and can go many different places. So that's the key, and that's job stability for me if my organization is doing both those things, not being afraid to make a nice, reasonable profit, but along the way, making people smile.
When we were doing our prep, one of the lines, I think you mentioned Martin Dome or Daimler Daimler Truck. My German ancestors would be horrified. It was capitalism is about making people want to give you their money. So it's when you say, hey, we've got to make money. Well, to do that, we've got to have customers want to give us their money. And it was just such a simple, like, oh, this is why CX matters. Customers are probably never going to go out of style because that's fundamental to the flywheel.
Yeah. Now, Martin, great leader, just retired as head of Daimler Trucks North America, or all of Daimler Trucks. He ended up having that role about 2 years ago. But we would be in executive retreats, and when that dude spoke, we listened. And that's one of the things that really resonated with me. And he's on stage and telling 150 of us, and he's probably talking about a Freightliner truck at the time, whose competitors are Volvo and PACCAR, Kenworth. And he says, the trick is to be good enough and take care of our customers that they really, when they see you, they grab for their wallet and open it up and say, please take some, because we just want to do business with you. And yes, that stuck with me. And we want to be the same thing. Premium provider that takes money from our customers, but it's a fair amount to allow us to do what I said, make money, serve society, and please them at the same time.
One of the favorite things I saw as I was reading through your information is you see your delivery team as kind of that, not only the last mile, but that last touch point with the customer, the final memory of the handoff of a bus, the final memory of that investment for the customer. That's a great example. Again, when you're mid-level in dealerships, there's a lot of CX champions trying to find a way, not necessarily the way, because it's a multi-line recipe, right? But a way to fully leverage that moment with customers. And that's a good example. If you don't mind, tell us how you think about that on the delivery process.
Yeah. Well, first thing I think about is my 79-year-old dad that retired and is driving potato trucks in central Michigan just for something to do, because that's who our drivers are. That's who they tend to be. We're lucky enough to be close enough to the OEM to employ a driver bank to go down and pick up buses and drive them back up here 2.5 hours away. And that gives us the ability, and we could do this even if we weren't close to the OEM, to hire our own drivers instead of a third-party drive-away company. And so it is those drivers that are 70, I shouldn't stereotype, but I will, between 60 and 75 years old that are retired, that just want to get out and deal with the buses and talk to customers. And so the fact that we do have the luxury of having about 25 drivers on our staff, and they just do a tremendous job representing us. They know they're the last mile to the customer and do the handoff, sign the paperwork, bring it back to us, answer any questions. They all have CDLs, so they know how to operate the equipment. It's just it's an added benefit that we have. And I was saying, I think when I got cut off, is every probably third or fourth survey done by the Daniel Group, the customer comment something about delivery and how positive it was, and how the drivers are friendly and represent our company oh so well.
It is a strong voice. I glanced through several of the surveys this morning, just looking for anything recent, and that was one of the immediate themes that floated right up. Right, and that's something, it really doesn't cost you anything extra. For us CX practitioners out there on the front line, that is relatively low-hanging fruit, right? Somebody somewhere is delivering the equipment, whether it was a rental piece of equipment, returning something from service, something that was purchased new. That is a great way to show up and start to get the influx of CX flavor and emotion and all the things we're trying to stir up in the process. So that's a great example.
It is, and this isn't a play for the Daniel Group because I'm not a paid sponsor by any means, but you got to have that feedback too to reinforce those behaviors, because I could have guys out there doing it, but when they come in the office at the end of their run and there's 5 of them standing in the hallway and Henry's out there and I say, hey Henry, I listened to your trip to Appomattox last week and the customer said you just did a hell of a job in delivering it and signing off. Well, the other 4 hear it and it gets reinforced, and they're going to start doing it because they want that shout out too. So 1, it's a luxury to have it. 2, it takes that little bit of information from the Daniel Group and let's just call it maintenance to keep that behavior going.
Kaylee, I love that you highlighted a positive behavior. And I want to dive into that just gently. But we in customer experience land often have, if you're an engineer, which is, I believe, your background, correct, Kaylee?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. And just curious, was it mechanical, electrical?
It was mechanical. I don't like electrons. They hurt.
So true.
And yet you were coining the Julie. But it occurs to me that a lot of us are focused on what can we do to improve the customer experience. Well, that sounds great, but it often leads to a mindset that is trying to find the gap between what's awesome and something less than awesome. So we're on the hunt for mistakes, or at least it can feel like that to our teams. So the fact that you would walk into a bunch of drivers when there wasn't a gap, right? The customer's happy. A lot of us get a 10 and just walk away. And I think one of the things we're realizing at Daniel Group is we're missing an opportunity, and we need to be more vocal with our clients to say, hey, those positive ones, A, there's oftentimes something that we can polish up, even from a 10 out of 10 survey. But B, get mileage out of that, build morale, and reinforce the behaviors that you want to see. Kaylee, was that an intentional strategy of yours, or is it just part of your leadership style to go ahead and reinforce the good stuff versus focusing on the gap exclusively? I'm sure you correct the gaps, but talk to us about that positive piece.
Yeah, I mean, it's intentional, and I've been taught that by my leaders, and I try to teach that to my leaders here. I mean, as humans, there's a couple guys that you give feedback to, and they're like, you don't have to give that to me. That's my job. That's what you pay me for. But those are kind of the minority of people. We all like a little positive something to go home at the dinner table and tell our kids and our spouses about when someone says we did a particularly good job. I mean, it makes me feel good when I hear that. And if it makes me feel good, it probably makes my coworkers feel good. And we're intentional in doing it. I had a guy at Thomas once who was an area manager of assembly, and he wasn't good at it. And we had some poker chips, and Thomas poker chips, they weren't worth anything. And he put 5 in his pocket in the left-hand side, and it said, dude, I need you to shift those to your right-hand pocket by the end of the day. Every time you give one of your guys on the assembly line some sort of positive feedback, you can shift one from your left-hand pocket to the right-hand pocket. And after 6 months, he's like, I can get rid of these things now. I'm just good at doing it. And he was, and his team was in a better place for it. But we wrap our minds and our emotions around the axle when we get that negative feedback, and it's got to come because we need those behaviors corrected. But we exude ourselves and become happier people and take care of a customer better when we get that positive experience, I think.
Yeah, it like immediately connects into the employee experience, right? And there's so much around that now, and that's part of this improved piece that we're working on is to try to connect a little more deliberately the CX to the EX, right? Cause and effect. And so that's just a great example. Again, I think that's something we can all take away is to say, hey, who is that last touch point? Who's the final memory after service or upon delivery of sales or a rental machine? And if we take nothing else away from today, that's one thing we could all come to work Monday morning and say, hey, let's go down that road. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
There was one avenue that I thought Doug was going to go down that I want to highlight. Like, as dealers of equipment, we're in a world where things break, they get delayed, there's part shortages, people have to fix it. And that's somewhat of the beauty of why customer experience can be so great. If I start asking these open-ended questions to my team about what happened, 50% of the stories aren't about a driver that said it was a great experience. 50% of them were, this dude called me, he was hot, I fixed something or I got him off to someone else and they took care of it. And they think better of us now because of the issues that we, as a dealer, created for them, but the way we fixed it. And that really sticks in far more people's mind and it sounds silly to say, right? We get more points when we screw something up, but then go fix it in the right way.
Yeah. That is really interesting. The human emotion of all that and what it means. That's kind of what it points to, right? There's the process of the repair, there's the systems, there's the tools, there's the human labor element, but it's the emotional inventory in somebody of, hey, you saved my tail. And, that goes a long, long way in very real relationships.
Yep.
Doug, go ahead.
No
Looks
doubt.
like you, yeah.
Well, and that's encouraging to hear, Kaylee, is you've got a heck of an opportunity to build customer loyalty if you make a mistake, and you got to find a way out of it, and it impacts the customer. It's not the thing that you should go out and try and do, just to be clear. But when it happens, because this is all a human game here, Kaylee, it sounds like those need to get this right, or I'm in a jam kind of moment, especially when it's of your own causing. It sounds like that's an opportunity to, come out perhaps even stronger post mistake.
It is. I mean, the specific recent story, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. We just delivered a $150,000 school bus 2 weeks ago in Northern Virginia that had drum air brakes, and it was supposed to have air disc brakes, and you don't come back from that. It's swapping axles and tearing the whole bus down. And we're commercial people, so the first stab we took with this customer was telling them, because they hadn't figured it out yet, but we figured it out. So we had that advantage, which puts us on the good side of the ledger, right? Like, hey, sorry, just noticed as we delivered your first of 4 units, I'm looking at the second one here, we spec'd the brakes wrong. Sorry, we need to fix this for you. We need to figure out a way to make it right. And there was 6 or 7 different solutions. And, you go back to the customer you're talking about, they want to fix it with you, but they're under their own pressure. Like the guy in this particular instance was a commercial guy and a procurement guy, but he had to appease the gals and guys that were operating the actual equipment. So he was in a tough spot as well. So we went through 4 or 5 different solutions, ended up finding one, which is pretty much them getting a brand new bus, but having to wait 4 months for it. And when they're all said and done, like, the way you treated us with that, and we're transparent about the money involved, but willing to do what's right. That's why we do business with you. Thank you.
Wow. That's an awesome one. That's courage. That's customer experience courage right there. And I wish there was more of that in the world. That is a great example. Congrats on that. Wow. Well, team, we got a few minutes left here, 5-6 minutes left. We do have a smaller audience, as Doug mentioned. So if anybody wants to open your mic and shout out a question, try to stump Kaylee. I mean, I think it's been hard to stump him on CX stuff here. So
way too smooth. Let's get someone get him.
Yeah. but feel free to pop in and ask a question. Kevin, I see you.
Yeah, finally back on camera, right?
There you go.
Well, I guess first I would like to commend Kaylee for having such a good point of view from where you sit in the company to allow the customer to be such a focal point for the line of business that you're in. Because I think too many times it becomes about the X's and O's and the bottom line and the P&L statement than the employee experience or the customer experience. So, I wish that I was in the same boat. I think that there's a little bit of care, and I mean, obviously, I'm here, and we work with the Daniel Group, and so there is some level of care. But to have as much as you do within the customer experience process and the employee experience process is really what CXers dream of. I think when you're talking about folks like myself, so I commend you on that. When you're talking about your town halls, how you go about getting the information on the postcards that you were using. What was the first part of it that I missed that led to you having employees write down whatever it was on those note cards and then sharing that? If you don't mind telling us again.
Yep. Thanks, Kevin. It was just this, ever present need to connect the 40 people in my dealership that are always interacting with the customer to the 140 that aren't. And so that was just an exercise that I've done before of collecting that morning. I was probably scrambling because I didn't know what the hell I was going to talk about in town hall. So I put it back on my staff to say, please give me one positive and one negative customer story. We collected them on note cards and then passed them out. It was actually my staff's idea to have their fellow employees that don't talk to customers read them. And so it heightened the amount of presenting and care because they all studied what they had to. So it connected them, the readers, closer. But the listeners is probably who benefited the most because they were seeing one of their coworkers have to get up and tell a customer story.
Thanks for sharing, because we think of many ways to frame and try to help it land. The CX piece of what we do with those that may not talk with customers on a frequent basis. you're constantly trying to find ways to help it land for them and see it in different light. And so it's the reason why I wanted to make sure I understood it from your perspective and maybe not the AI notes, what it was that you were doing, because those are the type of things that we really need to be taking back internally, for our company, because that's a big conversation we had recently, Brian. I mean, that's where the video idea really came from, where you had made the proposal for doing that. And that's because technicians don't always get to deal with customers. There might be that one really high level, high volume customer that comes in and actually gets to speak to a technician, but the day in, day out stuff just doesn't make it to the back of the house.
For what it's worth, Kevin, we tried something similar to that, not quite as polished as Kaylee described, but for toolbox talks with the shop teams back in the Carter days. And there was one particular store, one location where there was a lot of tension between a new technician and an old school guy. And so on the day that the old school guy had to read the compliment from the Daniel Group survey about the new kid, it knocked a lot of walls down. And as the store manager said, after that, you couldn't separate the guys. They were best friends. So it's amazing the power of that when you get your peers complimenting you, or talking about opportunities. Cool. Any other questions? We're down to the wire here. We want to respect Kaylee's time, everybody's time here, and get back to work. Kaylee, thank you so much. And the resilience, the dial back in even after losing the signal. I hope there's not a pole down in the front yard of the dealership affecting your Wi-Fi. But thank you again for taking the time and helping us get better at getting better. We appreciate you.
No problem. An honor to be on. And again, I certainly understand everyone's coming from different places, but everyone on the call is probably pulling in the same direction. So it's an honor to help the pull a little bit. Hope everyone has a great Friday.